animation is a really great way you can visualize your design, right? It's not really a new thing to render your model as a fly-through animation. For example, if you learned Rhino, Max, Maya, SketchUp, right? You are able to render a video file by set up keyframe of your camera. So camera basically is gonna flow based on a predetermined path. It's very similar like in other program like Lumion, Twinmotion, right, including Unreal. You can export a predefined camera path as animation. I mean, it's nothing new about it. So I have a general lecture here. You guys could watch. It's basically covered the technique you can generate animation as a visualization. Right. In the second half of this tutorial, this lecture, I also covered you can use animation as a modeling technique. That is really cool, actually, but it's not really relevant to our class in this semester. But anyway, check out this general lecture related to animation. Right. So in Unreal, there are many ways you can integrate animation into the system. So let's break down this into this workflow. The first I like to talk about is building animation. Right? It's not just about uh, animate a camera. It's actually animate the building. Right? So we call this as a kinetic architecture. The building, for example, you can, I think Nick, you took my studio in that year. You can create a kinetic structure of a building, and the building can open, unfold, or reconfigure itself. For example, if you think about the trailer house, right, which can be deployed on site. So that animation can be generated in program like Maya, Max, or Blender, and then you can transfer that animation as FBX, right? FBX is a file format which can include both geometry as well as the animation. So when you transfer this FBX into Unreal, into the library, it automatically generates this very special format. This is called skeletal mesh. Right? It's not a static mesh, it's a skeletal mesh. Skeletal mesh in Unreal basically means this mesh is dynamic. It has a skeleton system. It can be animated. Right? Usually you see this like character animation, right? Like for people moving, jumping, shooting, right? These are the typical animation you can bring in from other program. But for the kinetic architecture, it's the same flow. Once you keyframe the animation in external program like Maya Max or Blender, Unreal automatically recognize, hey, this special file has keyframes, has animation. So it will generate a group of files associated with a skeletal mesh. So this group including mesh, which is the geometry, right? The look of the shape. Second is a rig. Rig basically means the skeleton system associated with your mesh, right? If you think about the arm, the torso, or the head, right? This is the geometry, but also you have a bone. The bone will deform the geometry. So the relation between the bone and the geometry, this is usually called a rig in the animation field. So Unreal will generate a rig. It also embed animation file with it. So the animation could be, for example, jumping, right? So you can have multiple animations associated with the same skeletal mesh. So that could be several poses, different actions, different animations associated with the same character. So this is the animation file. Also very important, you have a physics. Physics basically determine how the skeleton gonna respond if collide with another object, or if you trigger this animation will gonna play, right? The collision will actually be active. If you have a door open, close, you can determine if the character can go in or not go in because there's a physics associated with the door, right? So when the door swing, you can be smashed. So that is the skeletal mesh. All right, so this is one type of animation. This is called the kinetic architecture. I do have this tutorial here, actually the first two. To save time, I will just simply play this really quick. The first one is transfer a keyframed animation from Max into Unreal. So here you can see the environment. I have keyframes is basically represent a robotic arm. You can move, you can keyframe. The second tutorial is about a kinetic building. It's a little bit longer. This one I covered. If you have, for example, a building being animated, you can transfer this animation into Unreal, and you can let this character interact with animation. So when you get closer, the building will be triggered to play the animation or replay, depends on the logic. So here, if I get closer, you see the building will unfold. Okay. So if I get away, I think it will trigger the close. Yeah, Nick, if you recall this project, right? It was pretty fun.
Yep.
All right, so you can have the third person view with a robot to interact with a kinetic building. All right, so this is the first type of animation you can bring in. A second type of animation, this is actually very popular in the game design, is the character animation. Right? We are not really cover this in this class, but you probably not gonna work as animator in the future. So if you do need to bring in some character animation, I would suggest using the Mixamo, right? Some free online library where you can find many, free animations, and then you can bring that character into Unreal. This is very similar like kinetic architecture. It's coming as a skeletal mesh. Then you can, trigger different animation based on the scenarios. So I have this tutorial here. Oh, actually, I have that tutorial in a different location. Is in the character animation session. I think that was covered last class. But let me just open that really quick so you can get some visual. I believe it's here. And in the session of character modeling, right? So here's animation using Mixamo. Okay. I don't think I need to replay today, but you got an idea. This is another very important flow from the other program into Unreal. Right? You can also do this in Max, Maya, Blender. So that's character animation. Right? So that's two. Any questions related to animation, kinetic architecture, or character animation? If not, I can talk more about the sequence, right? The animation sequence. This is a way you can actually set up a timeline in Unreal. For example, if you want to animate a camera, right, fly through, you can do that in Unreal. This is called cutscene sequence. In game design, you probably know when you play video game, sometimes you have a transition, right, from one level to another. During the transition is a predetermined camera fly through. Or could be a cutscene. You have the character talking, have a conversation, or have some actions, right? So cutscene in Unreal is very different from the real-time play. In the real-time play, you don't really have a sense of linear, time, right? You can, take as long as you want. You can go any directions you like. But in a cutscene, this is more like a pre-programmed cut. So you have a director who direct the movement of the camera, the movement of actors, set up the stage, right? So that is called level sequence and cutscene. And I have several tutorials related to this subject. I will play this really quick. The first one is about sequence a camera. So basically this is very similar like Twinmotion. You set up a timeline, you set up the location for camera, right? So it will fly from position A to position B, then you automatically get all the transition between these 2 points. Same thing for SketchUp or other 3D modeling program. So this is called sequence. You can also do more complicated level sequence. So the second tutorial I covered, you can set up characters in a sequence, right? So it's not just about the camera flies through. You are animating the characters. You can animate the objects in your room. For example, the fan could rotate, spin. The light can turn on, turn off. Or some people will have actions like walk in, walk out. You can trigger the audio file so the actor will talk to you. This is a really cool feature in Unreal. You can kind of like a director, you can direct actors to do certain things. And then this will be exported during the time play. You can export as a video file. You can also just keep it as a sequencer, right? As a sequence. The sequence file basically is a placeholder of the timeline plus all the instructions for the actors. So when you play the game, you can tell, hey, play the cutscene first. Then you start the gameplay. Right? So this is a really great feature in Unreal. You can sort of do the linear timeline on top of the real-time play. So that's about level sequence. I have 2 tutorials on the level sequence because it's a pretty large subject. The second one is basically demonstration of real project I have done using the cutscene and the level sequence. So I will play, just give you a sense. In this tutorial, I basically animated this character running from a street to this building. So this is basically all the channels, all the tracks about the movement. Maybe let me just play really quick. You can see, have multiple characters here. I have a predetermined path, right? So during the gameplay, they will basically just trigger the animation and they will run from one location to another. And I have some program to control their speed, control their switch from one action to another. Okay, so this is one example. Another example is here. This is actually more complicated. It's basically involve 2 characters. They have a conversation to each other. So when you get a closer to, this pair, this dialogue, the dialogue will be triggered. You can hear they are talking. But if you are really far away, they will stop talking, right? So that is the logic behind this level sequence. It's very similar like a video editing program. You have multiple tracks, right? Some track control this character, some track control the other one. You can have audio files play. That makes sense. All right. I think that's it about the level sequence. Again, this is all something labeled as a green color. So you just need to get a brief idea what this is about. You don't really have to do any, step-by-step demonstration. Cool. I think that's it about animation in XR.